Joe First. Here. David Polinsky. Here. David Lombardi.
Yes, here.
Steve Lemtron. John Yomack. Albert Garcia. I tried being over to you, Tony.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Today, there's only one item on our agenda, which is the MANA SAP. So I'm going to turn it over to David, who's our planning chairman, to give an update. Unfortunately, today we're not going to have a forum, so this is going to convert into a workshop as opposed to a board meeting where we're going to be issuing a resolution. So for everybody here that's expecting a grand resolution, don't get your hopes up.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Before we talk about MANA, I just want to say, because this is always on my mind, it's been 25 days since a new occurrence of Zika in the Wynwood Midtown Edgewater area, so we're looking forward to that number getting bigger and bigger every day.
David, louder, please.
I'll say it again. It's been 25 days since there's been a new case of Zika reported in Midtown, Wynwood, Edgewater. We're very happy about that and expecting this number to just keep growing bigger and bigger. So I know it's not...
I'd like to read something real quick that was in today's New York Times pertaining to the Zika. This is from the gentleman who heads the CDC, Dr. Frieden. He said today the shortfall of funding comes as officials are reporting surprising success with mosquito control in Florida. Aerial spraying over the Miami neighborhood with the locally transmitted cases in the continental U.S. has been highly effective. The success seems to have come from combining sprays that kill adult mosquitoes with sprays that kill the larvae. What we've seen is very dramatic reduction in mosquito populations there. He said the area was about halfway through the 45-day period, after which it will be cleared of the virus if no new cases emerge.
Right, that date for us is September 19th, so the CDC and the Florida Public Health have informed us, it's not official, but have informed us that as long as there's no new cases or investigations into new cases by that September 19th window, that's the date that the box will be lifted from this neighborhood. So that's a good thing, but of course we're still focusing on the broader regional issue that is the spread of the Zika virus. That's it.
Great, thanks. So back to talking about in this workshop the MANA SAP. So we're meeting here today really at the request of the applicant to see if there's any follow-up work that can be done to try and come to some agreement prior to their scheduled second reading on September 8th. I don't think there's any need to rehash or restate all the positions that the MANA team has put forward, the Wynwood Bid's commentary on those. I think we've been very clear about what our goals and objectives are, and we've got to know each other very well over this long process. And I think we're all good communicators, and as well there's now video records, so we're not going to go back to replay the tape here. But we did, since our meeting 1 week ago, I believe the MANA team has submitted their legislation, which is this, well, half of this thick binder that's in front of you. I spent a good part of the weekend studying it and looking at changes, and put together a document, simple document, which I'm going to give, which the board members have all already seen, and we'll give a copy to the MANA team. So all I've done in this document, so this is a copy of the original resolution that was passed by the bid board on March 2nd, I believe it was, prior to the original submission to PZAP, and then commented on through a secondary resolution prior to first reading. I've highlighted in yellow for simplicity those areas where I feel, I would suggest to the board, there's still a mismatch between what was agreed to between the bid and the MANA team and what's sitting currently in the final legislation. So I'm just going to, I think we discussed many of these topics at the previous meeting, but there are some changes, at least relative to what I expected to read when I went through the final document. So the first item, which is the graphic that we put forward last time with the changes in dollar amounts. So we don't have to rehash that, except to say that there's a deficit there between the maximum theoretical that's in the plan as submitted and what was originally anticipated based on the documents that were in place at the time that this resolution was put together. And that deficit is now, it remains north of $7 million. And that's money that wouldn't be going to the Wynwood Public Benefits Trust Fund. It's money that wouldn't be going to the affordable housing component of the Wynwood Public Benefits Trust Fund. And the MANA team will have a chance to comment and reply on all these matters. Maybe there are some new proposals that they want to put on the table for us to look at. So that's the first item. The second item in the resolution, which was a little bit surprising to me, we had discussed at the last meeting the provision that mixed-use projects in the East Zone that included more than 25% residential were to be capped at 12 stories in the East Zone. The East Zone being adjacent to between 2nd Avenue and 5th Avenue. I thought I understood Bernard to say at the last meeting that change to the language was going to be removed, but when I've gone through the documents, and perhaps it was an oversight, that this provision is missing still. And so at the moment, if the legislation is passed on September 8th as is, the MANA development team would have the right to go above 12 stories, even if the residential content of a given project was greater than 25%. So maybe they'll give us some feedback on that. Perhaps it was an oversight. The next item that we have is perhaps an oversight on our part. I think when we had done the original resolution, we had set out that we would discuss the phasing between the 12 and 16-story components, T6A and T6-8A and T6-8B in the East Zone. And I'm not sure that we haven't had those discussions. It's not necessarily that there's a mismatch in our expectations. I think it's just a loose end. The next item, which is perhaps more substantial, is what happens if the improvements to public open space have not been completed by the end of 10 years, and what rights, what entitlements would remain. Under the original version of the documents that we had approved, the benefit payment plan would have reverted to the NRD. So I think even that language is poorly drafted in the document, so we might want to talk through what it actually means. But given that the scope of FLR that the public benefit program applies to, at least on the Wynwood side, the Wynwood portion, has now changed. The impact of this section is vastly different today from what it was when we first looked at it on March 2nd. So those are, I'm sorry, there's more. And then the last item is that we had discussed that there was perhaps a Scribner error, I'm not sure, but there was a gap in the treatment of the parcels fronting 2nd Avenue with respect to temporary use permits. We had to ask, I think 3 meetings ago, or reminded the MANA team that the approval of temporary uses was supposed to be by the bid board itself, and that the language for not unreasonably withheld was to be removed. So I still don't see that change in the draft. It's a minor point. So anyways, this document's there. I don't think we need to go through our issues in any greater detail than we did in the last meeting. They're all well documented. But I did want to make sort of graphic, if I could, what are some of the concerns that we have based on the information that was presented at the last meeting. I appreciate that the MANA team was very, very frank and honest in describing the challenge that they face in making money right? And I think Bernard, in particular, was very honest in saying that the money was to be made in the West Zone and the public benefits were to be provided in the East Zone. That's a simplification, it's a characterization. I think we all knew that that was the case, and we can understand where it comes from. There was also some suggestion that the Manatee might want to put forward some proposals to change the phasing plan or the phasing of entitlements between the East Zone and the West Zone. I don't see, none of those changes have been put in here. Maybe you're going to speak to it, but it does raise, having laid bare the facts, which I think most of us all understood from the get-go, that you can make a lot more money making a tall building than you can a small building. And so there's certainly a lot of economic motivation for any developer to want to go vertical. And it started me, and I think it started the board thinking about, what is the given that that's the case, what are we actually looking at? What would a phase 4, what would happen if the Manatee, one day after an SAP were approved, came into the building department with an application for a building permit to build in the West Zone, which is where the max theoretical heights start to scale fastest. And so I sent Iris a couple questions, which she's now circulated responses to, but I think there was perhaps a misunderstanding in either the question or the response. So we asked what would happen if MANA applied for a permit in the West Zone, which is phase 4 on day 1 after the SAP goes into effect. I think Iris and the MANA team have acknowledged that a building could be built at 12 stories from day 1, which I think we all agree in the documents. But I will point out that already in day 1, without having made a single cash or in-kind contribution for public benefits, that 12 stories is already 4 stories higher than the T5 rights, which exist on the east side of the West Zone, and 2 stories higher than the D1 zoning, which exists today. So it's a pretty good deal. They get a bump up in the entitlements from day 1. And then the follow-up to that question was what public benefits, particularly in the form of open space, would have to have been completed prior to the issuance of a building permit. So I think, Iris, I'm going to actually ask you to resubmit your answer to that question, because what I actually meant was what public benefits would have to have been provided under the assumption that none of the East Zone had been built out. So it's sort of a worst-case scenario. You come in day 1 and you want to start building the West Zone because there are potentially greater entitlements there. So,
but we still have to commit. We still have to do all the improvements with regards to the West Zone. So if we wanted to go in today, like day 1, tomorrow we get approved and we go in the next day for a building permit, we still have to do open space in the West Zone, infrastructure in the West Zone. All those public benefits would be triggered if we started the West Zone first. So that's an automatic.
well, I think maybe we should review that together separately, because the way I read the document is that for a 12-story building, that none of those benefits would have to have been provided.
Oh no. What happens with the development agreement, which is the good in the special area plans, is that the development agreement binds you to what you're going to be doing with regards to the master plan. As opposed to if today we were to go and develop, we could do whatever we wanted for public benefits. We really didn't have to commit. We could do the bare minimum on a lot of the stuff with regards to development, just like any other developer might. What the development agreement does is it binds you to have to do that. Just like we have already pre-selected which public benefits we're going to be paying, as opposed to a project and give an open space, give a pedestrian passage, and that square footage could cover the bonus square footage of above. Here, we don't have that luxury. We have already committed to what our public benefits are going to be. So you have a guarantee of what you're going to be seeing, and that's one of the purposes in the SAP and the development agreement, is that you have that already in writing, and it's master plan and the streetscapes and all that sort of stuff. So unfortunately, I'm not when I disagree. We have to do it.
Well, that's not unfortunate if it's the case.
Well,
I mean, we actually all have the same objectives in this room, I think. But I do read it a little differently. I read it that you would have the right to go in for a building permit in phase 4 on day 1 without having completed any improvements. So maybe we can look at that.
On the east, but on the west, we have to provide.
right. Each phase that we go in, whether east or west, irrespective of the zone, we have to do the proportionate share of improvements to open space, to infrastructure, to whatever's going along with that. And that was one of the big things that the city was very concerned about, since we're a concessional site as opposed to we have a site plan and we're moving forward, is that they wanted to make sure that each component that came in, whether it came in as one big one, whether it came in as 4 little ones, however it may be, that they committed and did their proportionate share of the, so they have, in the development agreement at the back, there's these exhibits that talks about the parcels and the open space percentage that each one has to go in and do as each site is developed.
Okay, so maybe we can review that offline. The second question has to do with what happens if the 10-year clock runs out and 25% of the FLR in the East Zone has not been built. And there's a question here I was hoping you would pick up, because you have rights to not actually create the commons, but create a temporary version of the commons until such time when and if underground parking gets built. So if, you know, there's language in here, in the development agreement which says that at the end of, and it's very poorly written, I have to say, it says that the public benefits program is replaced by the NRD public benefits program. So here's the thing. The NRD public benefits program that we approved at the time that we passed this resolution is different from the, I'm sorry, the Wynwood public benefits program only applies to floors 9 through 12 in T68, and it only applies to floors 6 through 8 in T5. And yet, you could at that point have entitlements to build significantly higher than 12 stories.
But I can clarify that. When I had understood
And sorry to interrupt, your new definition of what is it, the floors that are bonus height is eligible for are different in this document from the NRD,
right,
from the previous version.
right. So what that language in the development agreement is set to do is that in the event that 10-year passes and unfortunately something happens and nothing progresses in manner, so we're at 10 years and a date, there's a couple things that happen in the agreement. One is we have our own special public benefits that we've described in our program. If we don't take advantage of those and don't develop under those, we would be subject to whatever's codified at that time. So in case the NRD changes, it's not applicable at the time that we elect to use it as any code, right? We could use the Wynwood TDR, the Wynwood Open Space, all the different public benefit programs that you all would have. And we have the enhanced height, because we have 2 benefit programs. So with regards to public benefit programs, as in section 314 of Miami 21, we would go from ours, which is in our SAP, to the regular NRD, which everybody else has. And the money would also go up to 1366. We would lose the $4.
But it's only applying on the 9th floor.
On the 9th floor on the east and on 21 to 24 on the west.
So it's the tallest buildings on the west zone conceivably would pay, but the likelihood if this happens is you wouldn't have an entitlement to go to 24 stories. So we'd never see it. It would mean that you hadn't. This is all about the scenario.
Well, you're talking doomsday scenario. Like,
well, I don't know.
It was kind of hard when I got the questions to kind of answer.
You described the doomsday scenario to us the last time we were here, and I think it created quite a shock. You said that you're really trying to figure out a way to build in the west zone as quickly as you can,
Correct.
because that's where the money's to be made. So, you know, it naturally has started us thinking about what that would look like. And so we took, from your plan, not for publication purposes necessarily, but this is your visualization of the west zone, and we've left the east zone.
We can't do that. We can never get to that scenario.
Well, you can certainly complete the public benefits portion without having done any construction in the east zone.
No, because in our agreement, that language is still in there regarding the 25% to 30 and 35%.
Well, you may not earn the, I mean, I don't actually know what scale these buildings are meant to represent. I don't know how many stories there are, but whatever they are, they're considerably higher than the surrounding area. And this is actually, this slide assumes a max build out in the NRD area, so that the actual real likely contrast between the intensity and height in the west zone and the surrounding NRD area is actually larger than what's shown here. So we're trying to understand it.
Right, I don't think that's really a fair depiction, Because we brought up as a discussion item the last time, the whole concern we had was the 25 to 30 and the 35. We're fine with leaving that language the way that it is, and we don't want to modify that language. We're keeping it as it is in accordance with your resolution, it's in our documents. So under that scenario, we couldn't get to that 24 without having 35% of the square footage in the east.
Well, I agree, that's what's there today, I mean.
That was what this board specifically didn't want to let happen, that we would go into the west and not develop the east.
Right, okay, so I'm responding to your comments that you wanted to change the phasing.
Correct,
We didn't see any language.
We're
but-
withdrawing that discussion item, we're leaving it as is.
Okay, so I'd like to ask the other board members if they have any additional comments they'd like to ask, and then you're welcome to speak to these items.
Yes.
If you don't have anything new to propose, then there's probably nothing further to discuss.
Right.
But I think we've sort of laid bare what our concerns are at this point.
Correct.
Um,
I want to give an opportunity to make that.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, there you go.
I tried to take diligent notes.
Okay, great, thank you.
So in going over, number one, I think this, letter A is the one we discussed at the last meeting, which I think we've all discussed all the different public benefits that we're providing outside of just not the public benefit dollar, but also with regards to the streetscape, the fire station, the public art, the FPL, and various other fashion arts institutes. We have actually a board that depicts all the different public benefit dollars. So in looking at number one, we had shown originally, had we gone in and done public benefits under your scenario with this 31 million, we're currently providing, when we came in originally it was 45 million, and now we're somewhere around 49 million. Now, I just want to make sure that that's understood with regards to the total benefits package, because it's not just the one number. With regards to the one number, which I know is of concern to the NRD, it is the public benefits dollars, the 10 million versus the 2.5. That still remains as is. But the rest of the package and the improvements, that is incremental. So I just want to make sure that you look at it holistically and you can't just look at the one number, because there's all these other improvements that we're doing, physical improvements, outside of just the payment of the public benefit dollar.
So if we can have a dialogue about that, I think this is a workshop, so it's a little bit more informal. I think our concern would be that list essentially is the same as it was back in March 2nd. You have not changed the scope. So if you're coming to the bid board and saying, we've changed the public benefits scheme and we're providing vastly more public benefits now than we were when we looked at the plan March 2nd, we could at least have a conversation, are those, because this is all about a trade-off between dollars into the Wynwood Public Benefits Trust Fund versus, in-kind contributions for actual capital improvements that you're making to the public infrastructure. So that hasn't changed. So from our perspective, there's no trade-off here. I think the bids board view is there's no increase in the public benefits being provided in kind, but the commitment to the Wynwood Public Benefits Trust Fund has been haircut by $7.5 million.
And I agree with you on that. That is a fact.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. But I agree with you that is accurate, but I needed you guys to understand that the whole package is still as
It's big.
committed, that we haven't changed it.
And by the way, my $31 million number was a little bit low.
I'll agree to disagree with you.
Okay.
On letter B here, it was completely an oversight, and I apologize. We have committed to that one, we're going to put it back in. I'm not sure why it wasn't in the print that went out, but that stays, and we agreed to that. Letter D is the one that I agreed we just took that discussion item off the table. We're leaving it as is in the documents. Letter B. So this transition plan for the maximum height allowing T6-8B, right? What we did with that, and that's just as a discussion item, there is a restriction on the T6-8B portion that we can't build more than 25. If we build a building higher than 12, it can't have more than 25% residential.
That's this one. That's this section. Right? We already talked about that.
Correct. But this transition plan was also relative to that T6-8 because we restricted what we can build in the T6-8 and we can only go above height if it was commercial. That was the T6-8B portion of that. 16 stories on the B side, we had that 25%. restriction on residential, it needs to be really more of a commercial build. Then on development agreement, 10 years from the effective date have not been completed. I think that's the language I think we want to sit down and discuss. But what we had put into the development agreement was at the 10-year mark, we have to have all the public space improvements completed. Meaning, up until then, there's a temporary public space as to construction, where we move it, and how it's going to be. But by the 10th year, we need to have that completed, irrespective of the phasing, irrespective of whatever's going on with that. If not, the city can say that we're in default of our agreement because we didn't complete it. So that's a fact that's in the agreement with an outside date of 10 years, as well as...
And what happens at that moment?
Huh?
And what happens at that moment?
We could be in default in the sense that they could hold our building permits. We could come back and ask to get amended at that point. They could say you can't build in accordance with this agreement because this agreement binds us with the regulation, and they say you can't proceed forward. So the city staff is enforcing that. And I can tell you, because I've worked on other projects that have development agreements, when you're in the building permit, they sit down with the development agreement and make sure that all the things that you are supposed to have done are done. So I know that the planning department is actually the one that's enforcing it with regards to the development agreement.
Does that mean you wouldn't, if you hadn't completed those improvements and you went in to apply for a new building permit, what would happen on a new project?
They would hold. If I were to go in and build a new building permit, and I'd have to go back to public hearings to amend the development agreement, and it requires 2 public hearings before the city commission to amend it. So at that point, if we're in default, we have to go and amend, or the city can say, hold our building permits. So that language was put in there. With regards to the TUP, not unreasonably withheld. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure, I do recall the TUP thing was a very sensitive issue for us, and a very sensitive issue for you guys. And I know that we agreed that the TUP would come before the board, directly, but the board, there's a typo there at one point, before the board. But that the board's review would not be unreasonably withheld is very important. Because today we have a friendly board and we work with you guys and we call you guys all the time, but we don't know what the board may be in 10 years and 5 years. So we would like to keep that not unreasonably withheld. If you have a reasonable reason, understandably so, but not unreasonably that, somebody might use it as an issue for us. So that was the only language. I think it's not uncommon to have that sort of language in legal documents with regards to that team.
I think I don't know if Joe wants to comment, but the city attorney's office might be uncomfortable with leaving that not unreasonably withheld language in there because it's just an invitation for a lawsuit. We say no, you can come in, we say no, we don't like it. It's subjective what's reasonable and what's not reasonable. So I think that was really the point on our side is we can be very specific, even as of this moment, what we, about things that we're comfortable with and not comfortable with for temporary uses. You might disagree with that and say that's unreasonable, but this is why we spend so much time, working on that area.
I don't know if Joe wanted to say something.
It's obviously a decision of the board, that's common language in a lot of different things.
And we've been working with the city attorney's office. I think it's Ross Rosseries at the city attorney's office has been working with the planning department and Marty on the review of the development agreement, and they haven't raised that point. I mean, we can, between now and next week, go back and revisit it. I mean, I'm open to discussing it, but I just wanted to let you all know since it's a workshop, that's something we'd like to make sure that we keep in mind.
I also want to mention to Albert that we had modified the CDD resolution to add that language to the buffer, and it's been included in the resolution.
So I think we all have a reasonably common understanding of what the issues are. Is there anything new that you wanted to propose for this board to consider?
No, the only thing new that I wanted to say is that I wanted to withdraw the discussion item so that in case we went down that discussion path, it still remains as we had previously agreed to. And to explain the difference, the whole public benefit package, and it's still very holistic. It's a whole big item, and it's way above and beyond what would have been the public benefits that they would have gone today under the NRV or even initially in the first draft of the SAP.
So that being the case, again, today we're a workshop, we're not a board meeting, but original resolution, and the well, I hate to have it to come down to dollars. There's a big dollar discrepancy that we can't ignore. So we have a follow-up meeting scheduled for next Wednesday. Hopefully we can put a quorum together at that time. But unless there's something new to propose, my recommendation to the board is going to be that we withdraw our support for the resolution.
Let me just clarify something I said last time.
Okay.
I didn't mean to give you the impression that we had a firm idea that the West would move first. What I meant to convey was that we have gotten some interest from, offshore companies that find the concept that we've been proposing interesting. We did our best shot initially, working with what we predicted would be first versus second. So I think we could have a conversation about one thing that we could raise is if there is language that would allow us to build out the West. The conversations we've always had about monocommons have been in the context of the underground parking and the ability to build the buildings on the east. If we actually, and you're all developers on board, you understand what's up, if we actually get an interest that would allow us to build a substantial amount of new projects that would bring people jobs and money to Wynwood, the financial issue of building the monocommons public space becomes less important for us. What becomes important is the cost of pulling it all out, building underground parking when the east goes forward. So if you do want to talk about some language that we might be able to agree on, that in the event the west goes first, what the nature of the commons construction would be, I think we're open to that. The only thing that caused me to say what I was saying is that all the time that we've been thinking about it, we kind of thought the eastern blocks would go first and the western blocks would go last. It now seems possible that the western block might go first. And if that happens and we can build the development that we think would be the appropriate amount of area and height, we're not objecting to the idea that we would build the commons. The issue is how much of the east do we have to build. So just put that in your thought process, because I think we might be arguing over something when actually there might be some agreement that we could reach on that issue. Because the phasing has become a more sensitive issue now that we're having conversations than it was when it was purely theoretical.
I appreciate that line of thought and suggestion. I mean, I think Iris Smith and I maybe need to sit down offline, but I think your original comment when you gave you the two questions was that all of the East Zone public benefits would have to have been completed before you could start any construction on the West Zone. Is that what you were telling us?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's break it down again. I'm not
All the public improvements, all the open space on both east and west have to be concluded in 10 years. That's our outside date for that.
to preserve the entitlements.
To preserve the entitlements and everything under the statute.
That's right.
Before that, as each project comes in, they have to do their proportionate share of those open spaces. That's why we have some that are temporary open spaces, because thinking hypothetically, let's say we have a building that comes in off of 2nd Avenue. Well, all the 2nd Avenue public open spaces are going to be done, but maybe there's a portion towards 5th Avenue that's not being redeveloped that we would want to just have a template, the permanent connect with the temporary until such time as that project comes in. But each project is going to come in and do their component of it as they pretty much as they face this open space.
So that's a phasing of in-kind public benefit obligations.
Correct.
As a percentage of the FLR that's being built out.
Correct.
So
each building.
Bernard is talking about
I'm saying something different.
different. He's saying
I'm
something
saying
different. That's
something-
my
Oh, I'm
point.
I'm saying something different. I'm proposing something new. He asked me for something new. I've been sitting here and I've been trying to understand where is the friction point between us. So we have all, I think everybody, has been thinking about the monocommons as a space that is not only improved, but is also surrounded by buildings. I'm now drawing a more subtle distinction. I'm saying what if the western buildings want to move forward with all of the commensurate obligations that come with the public open space of the western development? And we might prefer to go beyond the 12 stories that would be allowed under the current conversation. If we're building the west, then we actually have the ability to build out the public benefit commitment on the east, knowing that when we actually build the east buildings, if that's the scenario, if we want to have the benefit of the underground parking, we're basically ripping up a completed permanent plaza in order to create the underground parking. That has been the conversation we've had from day one. Don't make us put in the benefit of the plaza with all of the design benefits and qualities, just to rip it up when we want to pull in the underground parking. What I'm now suggesting that we might think about is if you were to take out the public benefits as a separate conversation from the buildings on the east, we might have a way where we could discuss the implementation of the public benefits that would be the trigger for the construction on the west without the buildings on the east being in place.
But it's very problematic. I mean, I sympathize with the challenges you face, but it's problematic because, you know, you're incentivized, since you have, as part of your development plan, the notion of putting in the underground parking someday, you're incentivized to spend the lowest dollar possible on the temporary improvements, like any developer would be. In addition, the value, the social value to the community of those whether they're temporary or quite frankly permanent public open space improvements is very small if the eastern commons, which is the biggest component of the commons, is not surrounded by these buildings with all these wonderful activities that we're looking forward to the amount of finding tenants for. So maybe there's a vastly different alternative out there. But I can't see, you know, whether it's a partial improvement, a temporary improvement, or a permanent improvement. It's problematic. It's of limited value from the community's
what I'm saying
perspective.
is if we were to put in the improvements,
Yeah.
period, not the temporary improvements, the final improvements,
I see.
as the public benefit, which we've all discussed, because the public benefits have never been the buildings, the public benefits have been the benefits. So it just occurred to me, sitting here, that one of the things that we could consider is putting in the parking without the buildings, building the final plaza, basically finalizing and completing the commitment we made in our document as the trigger for being able to build the west the way we envision it. And that way there's no longer an argument about whether you're getting it or not, because we'll build it. I'm just saying that, you know, we're not going to decide today, we don't have a quorum. I'm just saying for the purposes of the conversation for our own team, because they've never heard this from me either, is that if we...
It's hard to do to work.
Right.
It's the same.
I'm just saying that if we were to build out the west the way we want, we're going to need a whole lot of parking.
Right.
We're going to also have a lot of people, a lot of jobs, a lot of benefits that we've always felt come along with the concept that we generated. So if we build the west, and we actually build the final form of the eastern block benefits, you get the benefits.
But this is part of my, this is part of my larger concern with how this discussion has been progressing. The last time you came, you were completely throwing out the phasing, so you could jump and build all the buildings in the west zone without doing anything in the east zone. You come back today saying, or you keep the phasing, which is a critical issue for me, and now you have another idea, which is, again, removing the phasing on the condition that...
No, but Joe,
on the condition that you do the public benefits that you believe are important to the community, such as the Moana Commons, and then give you the ability to jump above 12 stories in the west zone. So these are critical material issues that your team, I don't think, has really grasped where you want to go with them. So it gets very difficult for me personally to find a way to give support. I'm happy to keep talking about them because maybe this is an interesting idea, but it is drastically different from the discussion we've been having over the last week and a half.
I mean, I could make a case that it's already permitted in our documents. that if you give you the final form of benefits.
Well, and actually, Bernard, I kind of agree with you. I think the documents are not as clear as they should be.
No.
Nothing personal.
So you said we need to go 25% of the base level are to get above 5 stories in the west zone. And I will propose the same question back to you. If we're now going back to this idea of the phasing, then why can't whatever these prospective tenants are or uses that exist, why can't those be allocated back to the east zone in the 12-story envelope that we've
They
already
could
agreed
fit in
to?
a building there. We just have always conceptualized the trade elements being on the west and the cultural elements being on the east. That's always been the very simple concept. So there's currently work being done on the Modern Contemporary Museum, which represents approximately 300,000 square feet of construction. There's currently planning for a temporary container use on Second Avenue. There's currently planning on trying to understand how the massing on the west would work, so when we go to the trip that makes the pitch to the Orient, that we have an understanding of what we can actually offer people. The reason that this came up is because we are trying to be transparent and good partners. We're saying, seems like there's interest in these international companies investing and bringing the kinds of jobs and industries that we were hoping we could bring, and that actually we might end up in a situation where that happens more quickly than the cultural types of facilities that we were hoping to bring to the east. If that's the case, the conversation we've always been having since we brought this up recently was, well, how do we know when we're getting the benefits? So therefore, the way my mind works is, okay, so if we can build all that development on the west and we can actually build the benefits, maybe there's another way to talk about this conversation, because the only thing that would be lacking would be the completion of the buildings on the east. Once we have it built and we have the plaza, there's no doubt in my mind that the rest of the project would finish.
But
It just would be in a different order.
But
All we're talking about is the order.
well, the order matters because in development, there's no fixed timelines until you have a permit and a construction line. So I think the point is that the plaza, the commons, the public benefit, the open space improvements on the east zone are vastly diminished value if they're not surrounded by these exciting
I'm not
uses.
sure that's true. If you have development on the west and all of the people along Second Avenue, Wynwood, using the plaza.
I mean, you look at the geometry, it's a linear park. If it's not filled in, sorry, let's see if I'm pointing in the right place. If it's not filled in top and bottom, it's a beautiful park surrounded by brownfields. And it's
Well,
just,
it wouldn't be brownfields, it would be grass or something, but the point is,
it's not maintained, it's ground.
listen, I'm not gonna argue the urbanistic objective. The urbanistic objective would be that it all fills in at the same time.
Sure,
I'm
so,
just saying that we're now looking at it differently, and I'm just saying maybe you want to think about that, because we might be able to create a plan that would allow for that to happen.
so two scenarios, I think, are come out of what you're suggesting, or this conversation, I should say. So one is, since the development agreement only distinguishes between residential uses and other, really, basically, it doesn't say anything about which side is cultural and which side is an international trade zone. So to Joe's point, you certainly you might have lower margins in development because the heights are that, but you could just change your way of thinking about it, as you suggested, and push the international trade into the east.
Yeah.
And all of your entitlements would still create the ability, maybe further down the road, to build up to higher stories and intensities on the west side, and that could be a win-win for everybody. I think, in fact, that's the easiest one. You do that and restore the $7.5 million, and we can all go to dinner.
And if I could just reassure, just go back, we are keeping the language the way it is. We just want to keep the discussion item open. It's not going to necessarily change between now and the second reading. So I'm really clear that that language is staying the way it is.
Which language?
The 25, 30,
The phasing,
probably
right.
get the phasing. So rest assured it's staying in. But we do want to continue the discussions to the extent that there is something that might be better or more enhanced or more agreeable. as just discussion.
So, and that's the other option that Bernard is suggesting, that we relook at how the public benefits are fulfilled in the east so as to allow an accelerated pace of development in the west. I think, the board members, that's not an unworthy discussion. That's a good topic, but it's one that requires careful thinking through. And I'm not sure that the board would necessarily be of one
That's a
mind.
great example.
but it-
As the High Line expanded, there was no adjacent development. The
New York
High Line
City.
was in place. No, but this is Wynwood.
Wynwood's not New
You've
York.
got people walking up and down the street next to one-story warehouse buildings, and they come in bus loads.
Right, but
Who would
remember,
think that would be
But we're
possible?
activating.
And remember, yes, it's all about the content that it brings them here to walk around. The linear park with grass on the sides is not going to be
It's not,
accomplishing the
all I'm
task.
saying is like all development, you've been yours and yours and yours. Sometimes you take things out of order because the law allows you to. And all that we're saying is we want to try to build in some flexibility so that we're not in a hamstrung position to change our concept in order to facilitate the desire for the form. The form shouldn't dictate, it should be the concept.
But that's not the right analogy, because the form of ownership, having this large assembly is very different than us sitting, we all own property in Wynwood, and only a small portion of it is contiguous. So there's a natural evolution of development where you may find, a few lots that are dirt, and then there's an activated building. Here we're talking about 10 acres of dirt. It's a different, so the phasing of development is a wholly different
What we're
meaning.
saying is we're activating. Right now, we're 10 acres of dirt.
Yes, we want to help you.
Okay, good.
Can I just go back really quick over the items? So we have, David and I, over the next week, we'll go over the items in the rear. One of the, I'm sorry, page 3 and 4, the highlighted ones, I think the other ones, B's and oversight, A, is a lot grander. To the extent that the Wynwood Bid would consider, rather than a motion to withdraw your support, that you support the other changes, and maybe just that one of the items, or condition your support on our complying with one. Because out of all the items that we've committed to, let's say there's 15 of them or 10 of them, we've done, to the best of our abilities, 9 out of 10, hopefully, by the time we clear up the last two that you have a question on.
So how many was it, 9 out of 10?
Oh, I don't know the exact number, I didn't count them. But let's say there's 9 out of 10, right? There's one that's the issue, that maybe you guys could say that you'll commissioner support on them doing X, or to the extent that you would withdraw our support if you don't get mine, because we really tried to make a very strong effort at combining a lot of the items. We've had to do a lot of analysis on our end. Like this morning when you sent me those 2 questions, we're like, wait, what happens? Or in this year, you got to think about it a different way, because sometimes these questions come up when we're trying to present formally. So just between now and next week, if you all would consider, however that may be or whatever may come, the motion that is made is very important because it really strives to help and work with you all. I don't think it would be very fair to withdraw it completely when we're doing 9 out of 10 items requested.
So I would suggest that, we appreciate that you're throwing other ideas on the table. I think that could be a productive thing, because if your development needs have changed, then maybe the plan does need to change. But obviously, as we've said so many times, the lens that we look through this quite legitimately are all 10 of those items that we agreed to back in March. And so I would suggest maybe we're on a productive line of thinking, it's worth working through. This is more than just develop. This has implications beyond just a few lines in the development agreement. And if we're making progress towards this goal, I would suggest you defer your items so that we can get it right, so that we can go to commission with wholehearted support for what you're doing, rather than conditionally saying, if you make this one, you may think it's a small change, but I'm pretty sure that the 1 out of 10 that hasn't been agreed to is 1 out of 10 that's very significant to us. So it's not that you're off by 10% in that case.
I was just trying to find, the balance, because in the event that you all find that the one item is such a huge issue where you can't support it, it puts all the other items at risk. So I was trying to find a balance that it kind of helps you all with the other things that you want to make sure there are restrictions on there, as well as us moving forward.
For us, it's a breach of a contract that you publicly acknowledged you were in support of. Now, if we get 9 out of the 10, to David's point, it doesn't represent 10% of the goal is missed. It may represent the very fabric of the essence of the spirit that brought those other 9 items into fruition and shaped the agreement overall as a larger, methodology for the board to feel comfortable with the plan in its entirety, which has also evolved since we started. So, in the spirit of trying to get our support, I would object to the board piecemealing that support on an item basis. I think we have to look at this holistically because we're reviewing this plan holistically. So I think we should continue to work together. And I would echo David's recommendation that if gaining our support, which I think we've made a lot of inroads today over the last 12 months, what's another 2 weeks or 4 weeks? It sounds like you still don't have a specific tenant in mind or a program that you're obviously waiting in the wings to start building out for. A lot of it is still conceptual. Maybe you're getting closer to that, and I'm sure that once you have that, you'll tell me it'll happen, and I hope it does. But the reality is we feel that there's a lot of changes that are happening at the 11th hour, and I think it's reasonable for the community and for the applicant and the team as well to work through these items internally and also with us. Otherwise, I think it's really ambitious for us to come back a week from now, and again, at the 11th and a half hour before commission, to stand before the commissioners, and we'll probably be standing in front of them independently before next Wednesday anyways, and we're already signaling our anxiety with the plan. So,
That's fair.
And I would add, in reference to the things going on outside this room, we can't not make note of the fact that we're giving up so much airtime to this topic at this point. We've probably spent more time in board meetings on MANA than we did on our own NRD development, and certainly at least at the board level. And really, from a community standpoint, what we should be spending these few board meetings that we have talking about is an economic recovery plan for Wynwood and how to get the rest of the community's needs on the agenda as quickly as possible. And that September 8th date that your second hearing is supposed to come up for is also the date that we're looking at putting in the revisions for the NRD, asking for special assistance from the city for Zika recovery and programming, art in public places. So it has the potential to be a big smash up on the 8th with a lot of unintended consequences. So.
I hear you. We've been working on this for 2 years, plus the time that we did all those initial studies. So we understand all the work that you all put in. We've put in a lot of work as well, made a lot of community effort, not only with Bid, but with other community organizations. So it's a lot of work. It's a big project, and we appreciate your time, and we know that this board is actually, like I told you, we're going to hire you some data to look at all your zoning stuff. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Anything else?
So, are you comfortable with pursuing a deferral of the item for next Thursday? Are you still interested in pursuing that as well? Because I think we also need to...
At this point, we should all assume that we're proceeding forward.
Okay,
I can't
and
say
then
that we're going to...
respectfully, we should all assume that the board is going to also probably withdraw its support as well. If that occurs, we obviously would like to continue working with you.
Of course.
And we'll continue talking.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're coming back next Wednesday, correct?
Yes.
11 a.m.
I should warn you, though, that we're likely to have several agenda items on that day as we prepare for those other urgent topics that we need to deal with on September 8th. So if there is some new ideas, it'd be better to get them all organized into a form that the Bid could hopefully say yes to by then.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Workshop again? Go in. No. I think so. All right. Meeting's adjourned. Workshop adjourned.